we would begin to see a kind of segregated higher education landscape.
Institutions need to live their values and not be afraid of being sued.
Woke media is having an absolute meltdown right now, and frankly, their tears are delicious. MSNBC freaks out over the fallout from affirmative action being overturned, a crazy case of censorship, and one of the most deranged anti-Trump TikToks of all time. All this and so much more is coming up on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where I take on the craziest ideas from across the internet and across our politics, all from a center-right, independent perspective. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing and sticking around, and regardless, do hit that like button and do comment with your thoughts as we go along. I do read the comments and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. Now, without further ado, let's check in on our friends over at MSNBC, because the ultra-liberal cable news network is not handling some recent news very well. We're going to take a look at a segment covering the new numbers that just came out of MIT that after the Supreme Court struck down affirmative action show an increase in Asian representation in the student body and a decrease in some other groups like Hispanic and African American. To me, this just seems like, all right, well, they're restoring meritocracy, they're not doing racial favoritism or discrimination anymore, and the results are the results. But MSNBC has a different view. Let's take a listen.
While all eyes were on the DNC this week, MIT released some data that confirmed our worst fears about the Supreme Court. The university's incoming class will be significantly less diverse than in previous years, and that's thanks to last year's ruling that gutted affirmative action. MIT, one of the first to release enrollment data since that ruling, says its percentage of black students dropped to 5% from 15% last year. And the percentage of Hispanic and Latino students dropped to 11%, down from 16%. Overall, all racial and ethnic minority groups had a decrease in enrollment except for Asian Americans, who had a 7% increase. And the university actually saw this coming. It was among several universities and colleges that signed an amicus brief to the High Court 2 years ago in support of keeping race-conscious admissions. Joining me now, Eddie Glaw Jr., James S. McDonnell, Distinguished Professor at Princeton University. He's also an MSNBC political analyst. Professor, it is great to see you as always. So this is not a surprise to anyone. I think when SCOTUS struck down affirmative action, you and others warned us about the impact this would have on students of color, saying that we would begin to see a kind of segregated higher education landscape. Your initial reaction now that we have seen these initial new numbers from one university, and what are you hearing from others in academia?
Well, first of all, it's great to see you, Eamon. We knew this was going to happen, as you said. I suspect that the data will be similar at the other Ivies, my own institution, Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Dartmouth, Penn, Cornell, and the like. We should probably see this across the board in terms of elite institutions and ranking or top state public institutions. We knew this. We knew the data. We saw what happened in California. We know just 10 years after Prop 209 was passed, only 96 black freshmen were admitted to a class of over 4,000 at UCLA. We saw a 44% decline between 2006 and 2022 at the University of Michigan. And so this was, in fact, the expected outcome. And what's so tragic about it, there are those folk who are reading this outcome as an example of what happens when merit is taken as the principal deciding factor, when in fact, this is actually proving the opposite, Amy.
So there's so much to unpack here. First, we should talk about how ridiculous it is to describe this outcome as segregated. No, what the heck? Absolutely not. There's still students of all different racial groups. They're just no longer actively discriminating in favor of some racial groups at the expense of others, which is what they were doing under the affirmative action system. And it's funny because this segment, the numbers and everything they're providing, actually proves our point. The critics of affirmative action always said, look, they're putting the thumb on the scale for some racial groups over others. And now when they switch to a race-blind or race-neutral approach, you see Asian representation go up and some other groups' representation go down. Yet at the time, progressives and Democrats regularly kind of gaslit us and said, nobody's getting accepted or denied just because of race. It's just part of a holistic admissions process. It's not a thing that's holding people back or boosting people and getting them admitted when they wouldn't otherwise be. Which my rejoinder to that was always, well, like, that's not true. But if it was, then why are you so dedicated to preserving it? Well, now we know that it was true. They were discriminating. And that's fundamentally unfair to those Asian students who deserved to get into MIT on the merits, but couldn't and didn't because of their race, because of a demographic trait they didn't choose and can't control. And actually, of course, every Black and Hispanic student should have access to an equal shot at getting into an elite college or any college, but you're not actually doing a favor in the old system by putting people into schools that they actually couldn't get into on their own merits because of their race, because that worsens the achievement gap that you then see in colleges between the racial groups, where some Black and Hispanic students would struggle more than their white counterparts. And maybe that's because they were being admitted to schools because of their race that they couldn't actually get into on their merits. There's still going to be plenty of students of different races and different backgrounds at MIT and other colleges, but the key difference now is that they will be ones who deserve it, who got there on their merits. And that's actually a good thing for them. Because under the old regime, you never knew if a minority student who was admitted to an MIT, for example, was an affirmative action pick or not. You didn't know that. And a lot of them truly were excellent and deserved to be there, but were unfairly tarred as affirmative action admissions when that wasn't actually the case. Well, now at least we know the truth. We know that everybody got in a race-neutral process. You still have different racial groups and nationalities and ethnicities all represented. You have less manufactured brochure-level diversity, sure, but you have a meritocratic system. And that is good and just and right. It is not some doomsday scenario or a crisis the way these MSNBC folks are making it out to be. The guest in particular, the Princeton professor, had some pretty extreme and I think out of touch things to say about this. Let's listen to more of what he had to say.
So what does it mean that we can't take into consideration race? Right? What it will mean is that they can't build the kind of diverse class that they want to build. And we know that focusing on class alone can't address this issue. So part of what we have to deal with is the bad faith of these actors who are kind of pressing this issue. We also need to understand that this is a kind of two-front assault, not only on admissions, but DEI generally. So even if you get admitted to these institutions, they're attacking DEI offices so that the experience is not, shall we say, as welcoming, as supportive as it might be. So I think institutions need to live their values and not be afraid of being sued. Bring the full weight of their reputation to bear in the fight for a diverse higher education landscape, Amy.
Well, whole lot of crazy in a very little space of time there. But first and foremost, I think the idea that universities should be trying to build a certain racial composition of their incoming classes has always struck me as bizarre. I really don't think they should be doing any such thing. I think they should just be admitting the best and most qualified students. And if that's 90% Asians or 2% Asians, 90% Black people or 4% Black people, so be it. I mean, that's always been fine to me because that's what I believe in and what most Americans believe in. And these are taxpayer-funded universities. Even MIT and private organizations receive so much federal money that they're really not supposed to be allowed to discriminate on the basis of race the way they were doing under the old system. So I think that's perfectly fine. And I don't think we're losing anything that colleges can't racially gerrymander their student body in this way. I also will say that to say that like people want to get rid of DEI on campus so that minorities don't feel comfortable is absurd. That's not why anyone wants to get rid of DEI. They want to get rid of it because it's a huge waste that teaches toxic radical politics and often stuff that heightens racial divisions and divides on campus. Very few, if any, really nobody is saying that we should not have, discrimination protections on campus for students. And there should be no administrators who, enforce the rules and make sure nobody's harassed or bullied. Of course, we should have it be a welcoming space for everyone. I don't think anybody's seriously arguing that. But DEI is something very different. It's this kind of racially discriminatory in its own right and toxic and divisive political movement. So people seeking to restrict that are not trying to make minorities feel unwelcome on campus. We can have a debate over DEI on campus, but that's a bit of a ridiculous straw man now. So come on. And finally, it's really disturbing to me to see this Princeton professor suggest that Ivy League universities should essentially defy the Supreme Court. He's saying, don't worry about getting sued. Put your full weight behind this. No, sir. We live in a society with the rule of law, and the Supreme Court is the highest court in our land. They issued a ruling declaring affirmative action illegal. Schools and universities have to follow that. And you are crazy if you're suggesting they should brazenly defy the law in order to try to preserve their ability to racially discriminate. You know who else did that? People, actual racists in the South who refused integration orders during the civil rights movement. I mean, it's crazy stuff. And all that would happen is these universities would get slapped down in court. They'd waste money on lawsuits. They would ultimately lose anyway. So advocating that is one, both hypocritical, right, from the people that complain, sometimes correctly, about Republicans and Trump's attacks on the rule of law. And two, it's pointless. It's a waste of time. And it's really a disappointing and bizarre thing to say. What he should be saying, this professor, others who want to see increased diversity, is okay, why is it that the merit-based approach that's race neutral doesn't result in an equal demographic distribution to the population in student bodies? And that, of course, has to do with a lot of systemic inequalities and issues. And why is that? Well, why do Black students have lower SAT scores sometimes on average, not all, but on average, than Asian students? There's nothing about being Black that makes your SAT scores lower. That's crazy. There's some access to education and opportunities and SAT prep and that kind of thing that we should be working to address and ameliorate and make more equal and fair for everyone. I'm a big proponent of school choice legislation that helps people, especially minority students who are trapped in failing schools, go elsewhere, and they often see better outcomes as a result. But we should be focused on the root causes, right, of why a merit-based, race-blind approach doesn't always result in these equal outcomes, perfect cookie cutter. Well, that's because people are coming in from different places, and we need to address the root causes, not jerry-rig the system at the end by treating people different because of their race to put people in positions and into schools they wouldn't actually get into and aren't actually qualified for. That is a disservice to everyone else, and it's actually a disservice to them too. So MSNBC can get as up in arms as they want over the fallout from affirmative action being overturned. But I think most Americans view this as a positive step towards a healthier, fairer, and more equal society. You let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you happy to see affirmative action heading the way of the dodo bird in America? And now we've got to talk about one of the craziest violations of the First Amendment I've ever seen caught live on camera. This is footage from a city council meeting in Surprise, Arizona, where a woman went to complain about a public official and was shut down and even threatened with arrest and forced out of the building by a security or police officer for simply exercising her First Amendment rights. I typically don't like to play super long clips because I want to intersperse it with my commentary and keep it live, but I don't really know a better way to do this other than to just show you the full 4 or 5 minute video. So let's take a look at that and then we'll meet back here to discuss.
So I'm going to take this time. I know you guys need to go into e-session, so out of respect for that. The item that I had requested to speak on earlier was during the consent agenda, item number 6, as it pertains to the contract of employment for the city attorney. So I'm going to start this off with, in the contractual agreement with Mr. Robert Wingo, there is a stipulation that says he can renegotiate his pay rate for an exceptional job. Cambridge University defines exceptional as something that is much greater than usual, especially in skill, intelligence, quality, etc., i.e. what is not expected of somebody in a role. And I have concerns with allocating more funds to him specifically for a few different reasons. Point number 1 is, according to an article that was published in the Surprise Independent just shy of 12 months ago by Jason Stone, The city attorney is the second highest paid individual in the entirety of the City of Surprise employees. And at that time, he was listed at making about $266,000 annually. Where this becomes important is he is 11th overall in the entire state, and he actually only makes $10,000. Again, at the time the article was printed, less than the attorney in Scottsdale. And Scottsdale has about 100,000 people larger than what Surprise covers. Recent months have uncovered numerous violations or alleged violations and in blatant disregard, I would say, for not only the Arizona revised statutes, the state bar rules of professional conduct, but also the Arizona state constitution and the Bill of Rights at the federal level. Title 16, I won't rehash everything, but we are all too well and familiar with what took place during the election season and the violations thereof. City clerk is our elections officer. Nothing was done with the violations, and the city attorney did nothing as far as that. Title 9 and 38 have conflict of interest pieces of information, and it was deemed that there was a conflict of interest. Title 39, there are numerous public records requests that I have open right now that are, quote, pending legal review that I am entitled to request.
I've got to interrupt you here because...
Okay, are you going to stop the timer?
This is the public meeting forum that you agree to when you speak, and I want to read this to you, that there are oral communications during the city council meeting may not be used to lodge charges or complaints against any employee of the city or members of the body, regardless of whether such person is identified in the presentation by the name or by any other reference that tends to identify him or her.
That's all fine, well, and good, but that's a violation of my First Amendment rights.
So that's, well, this is your warning, okay?
Warning for what?
A warning for attacking the city attorney personally.
This is all factual information.
It doesn't matter.
You're violating my First Amendment rights.
This is what you agree to when you first speaking. This is the form.
It is unconstitutional, Mayor Hall.
Well, it's not unconstitutional.
It is.
And if you're
the Supreme Court has upheld. I could get up here and I could swear at you for 3 straight minutes, and it is protected speech by the Supreme Court. It is.
No, you can't.
Why don't you look at case law?
No, you can't.
I can.
So if you want to be
also the chair is engaged in a debate. So
do you
point
want
of
to be
order.
escorted out of here? Do you want to be escorted out of here?
You're violating my First Amendment rights.
Talking.
You are violating my First Amendment rights.
That's your opinion.
It's not a matter of opinion.
Do you want to be escorted out, Ms. Massey? Because that's what's going to happen. And it's going to happen in the future also. Anytime you attack
That's why you changed the rules.
Or any
That's why you changed the rules.
This has been on the back of this form.
I understand, Mayor Hall, but that is completely unconstitutional.
No, it's
You're
not.
also engaging in debate, and so you should actually be yielding the floor to somebody else managing.
Chief, could you have somebody come down here and escort Ms. Massey out of
Really,
this
is that necessary?
chamber? Yes, I think it is.
In front of my 10-year-old daughter, you're going to escort me out for expressing my First Amendment rights.
She can go with you.
I'm not leaving.
Well,
Need you to step out with me.
I'm expressing my first. Do not touch me. Do not put your hands on me.
Need you to step out with me.
Do not put your hands on me.
Come on out.
Do not put your hands on me.
Come out with me now before you get arrested. Do you understand?
Are you detaining me?
Yes.
Why am I being detained? Under what charges? Under what charges?
okay, so
Hey, I have personal property.
Hold on.
You cannot trespass me.
yeah, I know. She can go out there. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to go into E-session.
Motion to go into E-session?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We're going into E-session.
This is a point-blank violation of the First Amendment. The Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, FIRE, which disclaimer I do some work with, has a resource on their website that I'll link to in the description where they explain what rights you have at a public hearing or public comment period at a local government proceeding, and you very clearly do have the right. Whatever some stupid piece of paper says, you can't have people sign away their rights. That's not binding. That's not valid. You cannot do this. You cannot remove people because they're criticizing a government official or because of their viewpoint. If you're going to have public comment periods, you have to leave them open regardless of people's viewpoints. And in fact, criticizing your government officials that are being paid. And I don't know anything about this city attorney or whatever she's worked up about. It's actually irrelevant. She is a U.S. citizen with a First Amendment right to petition her government for redress. It's literally in the First Amendment's text. And there's nothing more typical and embodying that than what she tried to do here. And instead, she was unfairly assaulted, arrested, had her rights violated in front of her 10-year-old daughter. It's an absolute disgrace. And this mayor should be publicly shamed and, yes, sued. The folks at Fire are going to likely sue them, and I'm wishing them the best, because this kind of thing is absolutely unacceptable. And to my conservative and Republican friends who still defend qualified immunity, the government doctrine that essentially gives government officials a liability shield in most cases from personal civil liability, being sued and having to pay damages when they violate people's rights, well, this is a great example of why we need to get rid of, or at least really reform qualified immunity, because she should be able to sue this mayor who violated her rights and had her arrested, or at least, I don't know if she was actually charged with anything, but at least removed from the building by police. She should be able to sue him and have him personally have to compensate her for violating his or her rights. But she can't, most likely, because of qualified immunity, which is not a good thing from a limited government constitutional perspective. And I just need my conservative Republican friends who, support qualified immunity because back the blue or whatever, to realize, no, we have to be able to hold our elected officials accountable. You guys let me know what you think of this crazy story down in Arizona in the comments below. Have you ever seen anything like this? Have you ever been to your city council meetings? I do want to know. All right, now it's time for Brad versus TikTok, my segment where I take on the craziest ideas from the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slugs.
Today, we're going to watch one TikToker's confused and hysterical video with kind of apocalyptic and doomsday warnings about a second Trump presidency. Let's take a look.
Why would I not vote for Kamala? I am a queer person who was assigned female at birth living in America. My options are literally if I vote for one person, and life and safety if I vote for Kamala. Like, of course I would vote Kamala. It makes sense that my community of people are supporting and voting for Kamala. The only group who would not suffer under Trump's reign are literally cis white men. That's it. One group of people. And America is made up of a lot of different groups of people, not just cis white men. So it makes a lot of sense why people are backing Kamala. But even a good chunk of cis white men that I've seen aren't even supporting Trump. That man is a compulsive liar. He'll post one thing on social media and then go and say something else at a rally. What he's saying and what he's doing doesn't match up. It never does. Hell, the man was using AI imagery to try to swing some of the voters to come and vote for him. Like, that is just so sad. That is so sad, but scary at the same time, because AI has gotten so good that a lot of older generations of people can't tell the difference between generative AI and real life. A lot of us younger folk and people who are constantly on the internet can, but not everyone can, and that's terrifying. And honestly shouldn't even be allowed for candidates to use while they're running for president of the United States. And it's quite literally someone who lies versus someone who has proven through their actions that they do mean good in this world.
Oh, yikes. There's so much about this video that I absolutely can't stand, including the very childish demeanor that the message is delivered in. Like, we're not toddlers, babe. I don't know why you're saying Trump and talking to us in this way. Like, it's really not pleasant. So maybe just stop. And look, I am not here to tell you who to vote for. I am not here to endorse either candidate in any way, shape, or form. But the reason I wanted to address this video is because of the hysteria and the unrealistic fear-mongering it entails that unfortunately is widespread on the internet, widespread on TikTok especially. For example, this person suggested that if Trump wins, trans people will be unalived, but if Kamala wins, they'll be happy, healthy, and alive. That is delusional. That is deranged. There is no basis in reality for that observation or that claim. It is pure and unmitigated fear-mongering. Donald Trump was president of this country for 4 years already. We know what he did and what he didn't do. And he did some things on trans issues that I did disagree with. For example, I disagreed with his restrictions on transgender people's ability to serve in the military. I argued at the time, and I argue now, that if they can pass a psychological and medical evaluation and be declared fit for duty like anyone else, they should be allowed to serve. But one thing he never did was kill trans people or round them up and unalive them. It's just madness. Like, what are you talking about? I don't even know where they get this stuff from. You can argue that Trump would be bad for trans Americans. I think there's some truth to that. But, you know, the election's about a lot more than just that one issue or that one group. But what you can argue is that you're all going to be dead, and that if Kamala wins, you'll all be alive. Like, that's just not true. You're scaring people needlessly. Millions of young people on the internet are being exposed to alarmist fear porn like this, and they believe it. It's really destructive and harmful to scare people like this. And I will also just say, side note about the whole thing about AI imagery. I do agree that politicians really shouldn't use AI created images of their opponents, because it is kind of misleading, and they should not do that. But the idea that anyone can't tell that pictures like this are fake, the one of Kamala with the communism, everything, like, come on now. You must think people are really stupid. It's obviously not a real photo. And also, anyone who'd be swayed by that is already a Trump supporter, right? So it's not consequential. It's not meaningful. And of all the issues dividing this country and dividing us in this election, the use of AI imagery in political ads just seems pretty minor and pretty obscure to me. So the fact that you dedicated half your pro-Kamala video to that was odd, to say the least. And look, I actually agree that Trump lies a lot. He says a lot of things that are not true and not correct. But Kamala does too, maybe less frequently, but she's pretty insincere in a lot of ways. She's flip-flopped on tons of issues. She's demonstrated a disdain for the Constitution, similar to how Trump has. And just said she would do things that violates it and doesn't care. Famously in 2020, she talked about how she would just try to ban certain types of guns via executive order. And Joe Biden pointed out, you can't do that. You need Congress, and that's unconstitutional. She laughed at him.
Can't do it by executive order any more than Trump can do things when he says he can do it by executive order. Does the vice president have a point there?
Some things you can, many things you can't.
Let's let the senator answer.
Well, I mean, I would just say, hey, Joe, instead of saying no, we can't, let's say yes, we can.
Let's be constitutional. We got a constitution.
And yes, we can.
So look, there's plenty of concern to be had about her and her abusing power as well. So again, I'm really not here to tell you guys who to vote for. That's your decision. But I do just want you to be in touch with reality. And if you are under the impression that either way, one candidate will exterminate a group of people, that's not happening. That's not true. That's not reality. There's plenty of true, actual fact-based things to criticize either candidate about. We do not and should not resort to unhinged fear-mongering and alarmism. But on TikTok especially, that's what so much of the political discourse is utterly, utterly consumed by. And I find it hysterical and reprehensible. Honestly, really, really harmful stuff. But you let me know what you think in the comments below, and do hit that like button to reward me for suffering through this asinine, alarmist content. And now I'll wrap up the show by reading a few of your comments from the last episode. And one person writes, my CEO has stated several times that if you have 5 people in a room and they all agree, 4 of them don't need to be there. Our company has existed since 2007 and is now expanding into European markets. So he's got to be doing something right. And I think this perspective has something to do with that. I love that. Honestly, I think that's great. And I completely agree. And I'm not surprised the company is doing well if they truly do value diversity of thought, which again, in my view, is the most important kind of diversity of all. Another person comments, my sister-in-law is a speech pathologist and part of her job involves home visits. A while ago, she's given a new hire to show the ropes to. And during the day, they're driving between patients. It comes up in conversation that her husband, my brother, is a cop. The next day, the new hire goes to management and says it's too traumatic to work with someone married to law enforcement. That is pathetic and outrageous in so many ways. But I also just have to say, like, you're going to see more offensive stuff than that doing home visits as a speech pathologist. I mean, at least stuff that's more offensive to you. What are you going to do if there's a patient with a Trump flag outside their house? Just not help them? I think you went into the wrong field. This person did, if they're really that fragile and that toxic and that close-minded. So really unfortunate. Another person says, Zuckerberg acting righteous about censorship is hilarious. All the Meta apps are heavily censored by his Zuckerbots. I mean, yeah, I agree. But I actually had, remember the Men Are Trash video that I reacted to? My reaction of that got taken down on Instagram for hate speech, but their account is still up. So they can say it, but if I criticize it, I'm doing hate speech. Make it make sense. I can't. Another person writes, I didn't send this small tip because they sent a super thanks. Remember, guys, if you put a super thanks, I'll definitely read your comment. Another person writes, I didn't send this small tip so you'd read my comment as I have nothing intelligent to say. No, I'm sure you do. However, I did want to thank you for your open-minded, intelligent, entertaining way of delivering political and other information. I really didn't follow politics much until I found your channel. You're so down to earth. You remind me of the cute boy next door. I know you're gay, but us straight ladies can still appreciate a good-looking man. And you've given me something to really look forward to each day as a disabled individual with 24/7 chronic pain. Thanks again and have a wonderful week. You see, guys, I wanted to share this, not because of the super chat, though that is appreciated, but because, like, I am so grateful that I get to be that for you guys, that I get to, you know, brighten your day in some small way or make you smile or make you laugh. And I don't take that for granted. I really feel blessed to be able to do that and know that I'm helping people in these kinds of situations. My heart goes out to you. I can't imagine, but the idea that I'm helping, even in a small way, to brighten up people's lives and maybe leave them a little bit more informed, that's really meaningful to me. And I'm so appreciative of that opportunity, guys. I really am. All right, everybody, that is it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Do make sure you're subscribed. Do hit that like button and do comment with your thoughts. I do read the comments, pick a few to respond to. And if you leave it with a super thanks, I will definitely read it unless it's inappropriate. And good luck to you figuring out where the line is. You can push it. You can try and push it if you want. But with that, we'll talk again tomorrow.